Welcome back to the Gridiron Expert. We're continuing our Big Ten football predictions today, and our next team returns 19 starters from a 10-3 team last season and could be potential dark horses in the Big Ten East. They are the Michigan State Spartans. Michigan State had a remarkable turnaround last season. After just going 3-9 in 2016, the Spartans went 9-3 last year, including a bowl win over Washington State to get them to 10-3. So you have to give a lot of credit to Mark Dantonio for the great turnaround that he did and really everything that he has done for this Michigan State program. So they returned 19 starters from that 10-win team last year, including 10 on offense and 9 on defense. On offense, they're going to be led by quarterback Brian Lewerke, who I expect to put up better numbers than he did last year. Has really progressed as a quarterback. I've enjoyed watching him, and I think he's going to be really the rock of this Michigan State offense. They returned L.J. Scott at running back, so a big-time get there. They returned their top 3 leading wide receivers from last year, including Felton Davis and Darrell Stewart. So big-time receivers for Lewerke, who can throw to L.J. Scott out of the backfield, can hand it off to L.J. Scott. It'll take a little pressure off of him. And then has 3 great receivers to throw to as well. So he's going to be set at quarterback. That offense is going to be set. And on defense, they returned 9 starters from last year. Raekwon Williams along the defensive line. Joe Bocci at linebacker, who's really going to be the heart of this defense. Had 100 tackles last year. Was the leading tackler for the Spartans. The second closest player was 26 tackles away from 100. He had 74 tackles. So Bocci really stepping it up last year. Expecting to be the heart of the Michigan State defense. And then the secondary, you have David Dowell leading there. So a lot of veterans at all the position groups in the defensive side of the ball. The defensive line, the linebackers, and the secondary. So they should be set both on offense and defense. And this is a Michigan State defense that held their opponents to 14 points or less 7 times last season. They gave up an average of 20 points per game. So you take that and put 9 returning starters that come back, this defense could be even better than they were last year. And the schedule works out for Michigan State to really be a dark horse in the Big Ten East. This is a team that I really like, one that I think could compete with Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan, those type of guys. And they open up the season against Utah State, and that should be a win there. And then a very intriguing matchup on the road at Arizona State, one that I think is really an under-the-radar game that not a lot of people are talking about. You have Herm Edwards going up against Mark Dantonio, a really fun coaching matchup there. And this is a Herm Edwards team that I think Herm Edwards will be the best hire for Arizona State in the future. I think that he's not going to have a great year in year 1, but I think he ended up being the best hire for them and will get Arizona State to compete in the Pac-12. And even if he doesn't, he's certainly going to be a lot of fun to watch on the sidelines and during the press conferences. But this is an Arizona State team that returns Manny Wilkins and 8 starters on the offensive side of the ball. So the offense should be okay, but the defense only returns 4 starters, and I think it's going to be fairly weak there. It is on the road for Michigan State, so you never want to take that lightly. But I don't see them going on the road and losing to this Arizona State team that could struggle in year 1 of the Herm Edwards era. And I really think that this offense at Michigan State is just going to be too much for that Arizona State offense. But I could certainly see this game having a lot of points scored in. It could be a shootout, but a win for the Spartans. And one thing that does not benefit Michigan State on this schedule is having their bye week in week 3. So they're going to have to play 10 straight games with no break. And once you get into the meat of that Big Ten schedule, that's really going to when you want a bye week in there, maybe week 7, week 8, and they're just getting it in week 3. But nonetheless, they get that bye going into Indiana, a Hoosiers team that has given Michigan State troubles in the past. Last year, losing to the Spartans just 17-9, so giving them a fight there. Then the year before that, in 2016, yes, Michigan State was 3-9 or did go 3-9, but Indiana beat them at home 24-21 in overtime. This year it is back at Indiana, a Hoosiers team that I don't expect to see a lot out of this year. Have a solid quarterback in Brandon Dawkins, a transfer from Arizona, but the defense, only 3 returning starters. I think it's going to be their weakness. Michigan State with 10 returning starters on offense, solid quarterback, receivers, offensive line, running back. They're going to be set on that side of the ball, and I think they can really put it on the Hoosiers this year. And a win for Michigan State there, a win for them over Central Michigan. And then Northwestern at home. Last year, Michigan State lost to Northwestern in triple overtime. So it was a really thrilling game there. One of their just 3 losses really could have made a huge difference in how the season could have gone for Michigan State, considering they did beat Penn State. But this Northwestern team is going to be fairly solid. 14 returning starters. Get Clayton Thorson back at quarterback. So anytime you return your quarterback, that's always a huge boost for a team and really could benefit that offense. But this game is at Michigan State. The Spartans are going to have a little bit of a chip on their shoulder, a little bit of a revenge factor after losing in triple overtime. Always devastating to lose any overtime game. I just don't see Northwestern, who I think won 10 games last year, I don't see them producing those numbers again this year. With it being on the road, I don't see them coming on the road and pulling off the upset over the Spartans. I'm going to give them a win there. Then at Penn State, This is a big-time game for Michigan State. This is the type of game that really affects the Big Ten East standings, and Michigan State wants to get to the Big Ten championship. These are the games they're going to have to win. Penn State, Michigan, and Ohio State. Obviously, the three teams I think people have ahead of Michigan State, and why not a lot of people are talking about the Spartans this year. But I truly believe that they could make a run for that Big Ten championship. They go to Penn State this season and face off against Trace McSorley and a Saquon Barkley-less team. They don't have Barkley anymore. He was the number 2 overall pick in the NFL draft, so that does hurt the Nittany Lions a little bit, but James Franklin's going to have his team ready for these home games, especially. Happy Valley, one of the toughest places to play in the Big Ten by far. They return a solid quarterback and a defense that isn't going to be as strong as they were last year, but this late in the season, about 6 or 7 weeks in, I think that Penn State's going to have enough chemistry there to get a big-time win over Michigan State. And Penn State also having a bit of a revenge factor as well, losing on a game-winning field goal to Michigan State last year. And that was really what derailed Penn State's college football playoff hopes. That was back-to-back losses for them. They're not going to let it happen this year. And I think Michigan State loses their first game on the road to the Nittany Lions. And then they get Michigan back at home. And this was the game that really put Michigan State back on the map last year, upsetting the number 7 Wolverines on the road. That's what put Michigan State back in the rankings, and really people started considering them a threat in the Big Ten again after that horrible 2016 season. Michigan, a team that returned 17 starters, great head coach in Jim Harbaugh, got Shea Patterson at quarterback. You had solid running backs in Chris Evans and Karan Higdon, Rashawn Gary along the defensive line. This is a solid Michigan team that really will compete in the Big Ten East, but I like Michigan State a little bit more in this game. I like that it's at home. They really have had Michigan's number since the Jim Harbaugh era, and actually dating a little bit before that as well. So this is a solid Michigan team that should win 9 or 10 games this year and will compete, but I just don't see Michigan State giving this game up. Michigan does have the revenge factor going for them, wanting revenge on that loss that they took last year, but it's at home. And I think actually this might be a more experienced Michigan State team than Michigan. So then they go to Purdue, or they play Purdue at home. This is a solid Purdue team as well. Solid offense, Elijah Sindelar or David Blow, and you've got to give a lot of credit to Jeff Brom and what he has done for this Purdue program, getting them to a bowl game last year in just his first year, really transforming the culture and the team of the Boilermakers. But this year should have a great offense, not a solid defense. Actually, a lot of questions on the defensive side of the ball. That's my biggest concern for Purdue. I think they hang with the Spartans for about a half here. Spartans end up pulling away late. Another win there. And then Ohio State, at Maryland, a Maryland team that, had a solid year last year, could have had a solid year last year, was 3-1 to start the year, lost their top 2 quarterbacks to ACL injuries, ended up going 4-8, had that season opening win over Texas, so things look really promising, but it's at Maryland, and I think Michigan State only won this game by 10 points last year. So with it being on the road, and assuming Maryland can stay healthy, Michigan State cannot afford to overlook this game in preparation for Ohio State. This could potentially be a trap game with it being on the road. They're coming off back-to-back wins at Ohio State at home. That could really affect the standings and see who gets into the Big Ten championship. I think Maryland will lose this game to Michigan State. I think the Spartans are able to go in there and get a win, but it's going to be close, especially if the Terrapins can stay healthy with their quarterbacks, whether it's Tyrell Pigrome or Kasem Hill. Michigan State really needs to watch out for this Maryland team, who I think could get back to a bowl game. Cannot afford to overlook this, but I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt, and I'll get them a win there. And then Ohio State, big-time showdown and big-time revenge game for the Spartans, who lost this game 48-3 last year. They were coming off the win over Penn State, and Ohio State was coming off the loss to Iowa. Iowa State was mad. They were angry. And despite it being on the road, I expected Michigan State to really put a lot more numbers up on the board and really give them a bigger fight. But they lost that game 48-3. They just were not ready for that angry Buckeyes team. But this year they're at home. 2 years ago, with a horrible Michigan State team, they nearly beat Ohio State. They lost 17-16. The year before that, Michigan State won the game at Ohio State, which really got them to the college football playoff and kept Ohio State out of it. So a lot of factors going into this game, a really good rivalry game here. My initial instinct would be to give Michigan State the win with it being at home and with them being more experienced, but I'm actually going to give the Buckeyes the win here. I really like Dwayne Haskins, and I really like Nick Bosa on that defensive line. 2 very solid players there, the anchors for both of those teams, and Urban Meyer I've learned to never doubt. Ohio State's really going to be wanting to get into the college football playoff this year after just missing out last year. A little bit of a chip on their shoulder. I think they get a big-time win on the road against Michigan State, so a loss there. And then at Nebraska, a Scott Frost team that really could get back to a bowl game this year. I'm really excited to see how the Cornhuskers do. I'm really excited to see how Scott Frost does with this Nebraska team. They're going to start a freshman quarterback, though, more than likely, so that's going to hurt the Cornhuskers a little bit. They have Stanley Morgan at wide receiver, which is going to be really solid for them, one of the better wide receivers, I think, in the Big Ten. And the last time that Michigan State went to Nebraska, they lost that game in 2015, 39-38 in the last minute. If you go look, the Nebraska wide receiver was pushed out of bounds, came back in, caught the ball, scored the touchdown, and defeated the Spartans. So it was a thrilling game, and many felt that could have been the end of Michigan State's playoff hopes, but then just a few weeks later, they beat Ohio State on the road without their starting quarterback, got to the college football playoff. I don't see that happening again this year. Two-loss Michigan State team is probably going to be out of the college football playoff discussion by this point, and it's a Nebraska team that really wasn't as solid as the one back in 2015, even though they did struggle back then. Scott Frost is going to go through some growing pains with the Cornhuskers in year one. I think Michigan State, angry after a home loss to Ohio State, gets the win over the Cornhuskers. And then Rutgers, to close out the year, shouldn't be much of a problem for the Spartans. A Rutgers team that should improve a little bit from last year's 4-8 record. A lot of returning starters on both sides of the ball, but I just don't see Rutgers coming on the road and beating the Spartans there, so that should be a pretty solid and easy win for them. So that's going to give Michigan State a 10-2 record on the year, which is an improvement from last season. It's an improvement from that 9-3 record they had last year. Could be an 11-win season if they can win the bowl game. But with losses on the road to Penn State and at home against Ohio State, arguably two of the better teams in this Big Ten East and just the Big Ten in general, I just don't see Penn State making the Big Ten championship this year. Maybe if they can beat Ohio State, this is really the big game. If they can beat Ohio State at home, because I think they will beat Michigan at home, who's obviously a contender as well. If they beat Ohio State, I think Michigan State gets to the Big Ten championship, because I don't think Penn State's going to lose just once. I think they'll lose at least twice. So if they can beat Ohio State, I think Michigan State goes to the Big Ten championship. But right now, I just don't see it. I just don't see them beating the Buckeyes with the type of offense they're going to have in this Urban Meyer-led team. I just don't see it happening. But obviously, still a very solid year for Mark Dantonio and his very, very experienced Spartan team, who is getting slept on right now. And mark my words, they will surprise a lot of people if they continue to be slept on and don't start getting enough attention. So this is a very solid Michigan State team, and I cannot wait to see what they do in the Big Ten East this year. So as always, please continue to go check us out on Twitter at Gridiron Expert, on Instagram at The Gridiron Expert, and always here on YouTube. Please continue to like, comment, and subscribe, and we will see you next time on The Gridiron Expert.